Some of our viewers might be familiar with the book called Coota and the Magic Quilt. It's by an author from Roxbury, Haywood Fennell Sr. If our guests have their way, the book will also take on new life as an animated film. To talk about the project are the film's director, Mike King, and storyboard artist and 2D artist, Yolimar Perozo. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I want to start with Mike King. You started by reading the book and then you got this idea. Talk about it.
Yeah, I saw the book and, took a perusal, read it, and I thought it would be a good story to animate. And I've always been interested in trying to create stories, animation stories that had people of color, black characters and stuff in them. A lot of the ones that I've seen in Disney when I'd grown up didn't really have that. And so I talked to Haywood and I said, Haywood, man, we should, let's try to see if we can create an animation from this. And first, he kind of looked at me sideways and was like, okay, sure. But after a couple of years of me I kept mentioning it to him. And then he said, okay, let's sit down and talk about it. We both finally found time to talk about it. And about a year or so ago, we did the screenplay, adapted the book to a screenplay, added some other items and stuff, and now we're on our way.
Well, in some ways, this book, it follows a pattern familiar with children's stories. You have a child who is at least in danger of getting into trouble, and then something happens, they're transformed, they're transported to this other world. So pick it up from there. What's going on in this story?
Well, basically we have a young black boy, about 11 years old, who is sent down south to sort of get away from some of the inner city violence and being sort of swept up and influenced by his peers. And he's sent to his grandmother's house, and in the midst of being down there, all of a sudden he's transformed to the middle of slavery time, and he's placed in the middle of some runaways who are trying to escape to freedom. And so, basically that's where the story is. And part of the, when you talk about the magic quilt, we wanted to bring some historical references in. Quilts were used by the slaves and freedom fighters to help signal like houses that were safe, where crossings were, to get to the north and things like that. The quilts were used, as signs and symbols in that, the slavers weren't aware of at the time.
And we can bring up an excerpt and show our viewers some of what our guests have in mind.
Suddenly, Coota finds himself in the South during slavery times. Trouble still manages to find him. He hooks up with a group of runaways. Dogs and slave catchers are hot on their heels. Will help arrive in time? Will he ever see Miss Maddie, his mother, his friends? Coota and the Magic Quilt. The message in the magic is coming.
Going home to
Turn to Yolimar. You have quite a lot of responsibility here because you're the 2D artist and the storyboard artist. So talk about what you're doing.
So yes, basically I mentioned I'm a 2D artist, which basically is the overall illustrations that I have done for the pre-production of the movie. Basically, I've done the character designs of Coota as well as the rest of the other characters. I've done the character model sheets on what it would appear if it was in 3D perspective, and to help out the 3D modelers and to see how the bodies and the perspectives would be, the size, well, the height anyways. And then I've also done the backgrounds for each shot because I'm also a storyboard artist. So I planned out the shots that would be based on the script that Mr. King has written, and that way I can be able to illustrate it out.
There's a role here for your imagination and your perception. So how do you do the groundwork for doing this?
One of the things that I always try to be careful is that I have my own ideas of how I would see the shots, but I also, with the respect of Mr. King and Haywood, I want to be able to also capture their ideas from their perspectives of what they see within the shots. So it's a way of being able to collide all the ideas together to see if it's the perfect perspective that they would see for each shot. So I want to be able to capture the reactions of Coota, the movements of when they are running away from trouble. Even just a simple shot where he's talking to his grandmother, just every shot is meaningful in its way, and that could tell what's going on.
What about the mission in doing it? I mean, I know you want to make enough money to pay the bills, but aside from that, reaching people who might not read the book, maybe?
Well, I think one of the ideas and one of the things that we thought would make this relevant is in terms of literacy. And one of the things we see when we look at animated movies and books that are from books is that they both sort of feed off each other. So, and when you have an animated movie from a book, the book sales increase, and it's vice versa. So there are two things that feed off each other. So we thought that this would also help in literacy and getting people to read, getting inner city youth or urban youth to read more, and we think that's very relevant and very needed.
Yolimar, what about your involvement? What got you going with this?
Well, first of all, I definitely want to become a storyboard artist. Like, basically, ever since I was a child, I loved films, cartoons, and then as well as being part of a generation where I can be able to help a community. So I do believe that this story does explain about a lot about self-transformation of where you're from, but then know which path you're trying to take in your life, so that way you can have a better future, and that way you can be able to learn about yourself, basically.
Mike, I guess that's the interesting thing about this book here is that sometimes the things that we think of as the local values on the street are sometimes not as local as you realize, and then you go back in this trip here, and history teaches you a different way of looking at those things.
Yeah, I think one of the other ideas that we wanted to talk about was language. There's parts of the story that talk about some of the language.
The use of the word dogs, for instance.
The use of the word dogs and the N-word, as they say, and how that's used. And so there are some issues and some parts of the story that talk about this. And we hope that this will add some added information in the back of people's minds when they're getting ready to use some of this language. They'll think a little more about what it has meant, what the history has been.
Well, of course, you also have to look toward the future here. So to make this work, you need some supporters. So explain the strategy here. Yeah,
right now we're in the middle of an Indiegogo campaign, and what that is a crowdfunding site. And if you go to Indiegogo.com and bring up Coota and the Magic Quilt, you'll see that we're in the process of this campaign. The money that we're trying to raise currently is to create a proof of concept, which producers and distributors of movies need before they sort of go forward with it. They want to really see what is our vision for the film aesthetically, as well as content-wise.
So if people want to connect with that, what's the best way for them to seek it out?
Go to Indiegogo. You go to Coota and the Magic Quilt is the name of animated movie project.
All right, well, thank you both very much. Mike King and Yolimar Perozo.